Ferrari have identified a crucial issue that left them out of competition in Imola, and although many fans are negatively oriented after what they saw in their home GP, it seems like this won't be the scenario after all. After finding out where they lost the majority of their speed, Ferrari is now focused on fixing this issue as early as possible, potentially even for Monaco, even though it will matter the most in Barcelona and the races where the long straights are present. Combined with McLaren's threat of being the second fastest team on the grid, could we see Ferrari keep this position for the remainder of the season? And more importantly, do they have what it takes to challenge Red Bull in a raw fight? It goes without saying that Ferrari's performance in Imola was questionable, to say the least, but that doesn't mean they weren't able to identify the issue from the upgrades they introduced. Charles Leclerc was the first one to talk about it, and it seems like the top speed is not nearly where it's supposed to be, which then again cost them a lot in Sector 1 as well, due to the combination of corners that effectively ruined Leclerc's opportunity to catch up with the top two drivers on the grid. When talking about this for the upcoming races, as well as the remainder of 2024, the Monegasque driver said, "We lost everything in the straights, and McLaren and Red Bull are doing something weird with the energy engine-wise. So we've got to look into it, but it's nothing that's impossible to change. After we'll look into that and fix it, I think we've got a real shot at going back on the top step of the podium." The key takeaway from this statement is not only the fact that Ferrari has identified their problem, but actually being optimistic when it comes to fixing it. The stats say it all. Compared to Norris and Verstappen, Leclerc was slower in the main straights, gaining a top speed of 316 km per hour, while the other two drivers were well in the 320 km per hour range. This is crucial because it also allows the drivers to have a better understanding of the braking zone that comes in turn 1, which then again all comes down to setup changes and driver preferences as well. This could be one of the main reasons why Sainz was struggling a lot more than in the first couple of races, with the Spaniard finishing a staggering 15 seconds behind his teammate in Imola. Be that as it may, Ferrari's top speed is not something that should be troubling to fix. This is mostly extracted out of the engine potential, and a simple setup change could nudge them in the right direction. On a track like Imola, the teams are always trading performance with ride height and downforce generation because of the nature of the track, which has a lot of curbs and bumps along it. If you drive the car too low to the ground, these attributes threaten to deal a lot of floor damage if you tend to enter them wrong, not to talk about getting off track and finding the gravel. But if you ride the car too high, then you are essentially losing a lot of downforce as a trade, and the top speed as well as the high speed corners will be some of the primary points of suffering. What is also worth mentioning is that Ferrari's upgrade, although highly anticipated and extremely important for them, was not as big as many would have predicted. This was pointed out by Sainz, and while many believe that it's just a plain excuse for him not being able to be nearly as competitive as Leclerc, it's also worth noting that Vasseur had the same opinion before the race, saying that it's just the first out of the 3 major steps that Ferrari plans for 2024. However, the general opinion in the team is that they found out exactly what they needed to do in order to fight for wins. All they have to do is fine-tune the car now in order to understand what type of setup would work perfectly within their current upgrades. When talking about the upgrades to a greater extent, Sainz went on to say, "The upgrades worked exactly as we expected. Unfortunately, for some reason, everyone expected us to be fine this weekend with a new package. I've been seeing numbers of our package going around that were completely out of reality nowadays. Already bringing a tenth of a second is a good job by the team, and I'm not saying we've got 1, 2 or half a tenth, but it's definitely not the number people were mentioning." Definitely there is a lot more work to be done, and while Sainz's statement sounds kind of depressing after the original hype that revolved around the upgrade package in Imola, it does present a realistic picture for the Maranello team. Catching up with a team that was so far ahead in the past couple of seasons in a matter of one upgrade package is definitely not possible, and with McLaren introducing heavy upgrades for the past couple of years and following a steady uprise curve, it goes to show that the fight is all but over for the remainder of 2024. The advantage for Ferrari is that they are not done extracting the potential out of their upgrade package in Imola. The fact that they kept the tyre preservation in the perfect window, just like they did before the upgrades, goes goes to show that this aspect of the car won't suffer for the remainder of the season. Of course, if they go with an extremely lateral setup change, then it would put them in a difficult position, because just like we've seen with the RB20, a small change in the setup has a great effect on the tyre behaviour, only with the difference that Red Bull went with an extreme design and philosophy change that they do not have the comfort to experiment as much as Ferrari. That's why Monaco's GP might be even more of a great chance for Ferrari to grab a win, because if you think about it, this is a track where the top speed doesn't matter at all. It's the slowest track on the grid, and the downforce requirements as well as the low speed corner behaviour of the cars are what matter the most. When being asked about his chances in Monaco, Leclerc's optimism in his statement was contagious, as the home hero went on to add, "Yes, I believe I am going to win in Monaco. I came to Imola to win. We have this mentality every time we approach a weekend. On a track like Monaco, everything is possible, and we'll go there with the win in mind. I'm only happy when I win, and today we didn't quite make it, but it's looking good for the rest of the season." I really believe Imola was all about track position. I think our pace is very, very strong. I'm more optimistic than yesterday looking back at the qualifying, because this is where I think we are lacking a weekend like this. And what makes me optimistic is that if I look back at the data, I thought we were losing in turns 2, 3 and 4, which would have been tyre related again, but that wasn't the case. However, we cannot turn a blind eye to what Red Bull did in Imola. Verstappen had more or less the third fastest car on the grid, and he managed to put it in pole position and keep a steady advantage over Norris until the tyres started to fall off at the end of their lifetime. This might be an indicator as to where Ferrari could catch up to Red Bull, and although it is much easier said than done, with proper work back in the factory as well as a stable platform to introduce upgrades to, the Italian team will have a lot to look forward to in the remainder of 2024. Definitely, it's impossible to understand all of the package in one race, and similar to how Red Bull struggled within the first couple of practice sessions with the RB20, the same scenario applied to Ferrari once they locked in the setup for the SF24. That, however, is just a plain spectre that Ferrari can rely on, but what they need to be investing heavily in is the performance of the drivers on the track. Verstappen's skills as well as confidence in the car are what propelled him to the win, as Perez's Q2 exit is a stronger indicator as to where Red Bull would finish if they didn't have such a power machine in Verstappen to lead the pack ahead. Perez's poor performance, however, opens up a great gap for Ferrari to capitalise on in the Constructors' Championship, but it's worth mentioning that the Maranello team will need both of its drivers to be delivering at the highest possible point week in and week out in order to be in any position to threaten Red Bull, and from what we've witnessed, McLaren as well. With this in mind, do you think that there is an opportunity for Leclerc and Ferrari to celebrate a much-needed home victory for the superstar driver? And more importantly, do you think that Ferrari can unlock even more potential from the current upgrades they introduced in Imola? Let us know in the comments below. Once you do that, make sure to check out the video that's appearing on your screen right now.